All right, all right, all right. It is Tuesday. It is Tuesday, and it is stacking up time. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at IrishBreakdown.com. And with me, as always, is that guy right there. That's Brian Driscoll. He is the publisher at IrishBreakdown.com. And we are going to talk today. We're kind of back to our regular schedule. We called a couple of audibles last week because it was Navy, and
I didn't want to talk about the option.
It's Navy. I mean, that's really all there is to it.
Yeah.
But we're back to Virginia and a regular offense and
regular defense.
I would say a regular defense, but I mean that might be pushing the envelope a
regular
little bit.
for what Notre Dame's facing the last 6 games of the season.
Wow. But we're going to talk Notre Dame's offense versus Virginia's defense today, and how they stack up, and that's why this show is called Stacking Up. And some interesting observations by you on this defense as we were texting back and forth this morning, talking about the show and basically who this defense is and how they're allowed to play Division I football. Basically, is how
it's
what I
really
say.
bad. I mean, I was texting with you and a friend of mine earlier, and I don't understand what's going on in the ACC right now. It's like they're trying to, like, they looked and saw what happened to the Big 12 and said, yeah, those teams constantly get killed when they go out of conference because they can't stop anybody. But man, it sure is fun. Let's try that. I mean, that's really what the ACC is becoming outside of what Clemson. BC tries to play good defense. Outside of Clemson and BC, I don't know anyone in the ACC that really tries to play good defense right now.
Yeah.
But just off the top of my head, I mean, they're bad. I mean, North Carolina is recruiting some really good defensive players, some highly ranked guys, and their defense is atrocious.
Right.
Virginia can't use that excuse. They're not only poorly, just the plan isn't great. They don't have a ton of talent either.
Right.
And that's what makes them.
I think I have more of an issue with the plan. I mean, I get that they don't have a ton of talent, but at the same time, I don't feel like they're putting their guys in position to be successful. Very much.
And it's a combination of that plus they don't have a lot of good players. And like I'm watching a BYU game and I'm just like, BYU's guys are just way better than them, and the combination of that and what they're doing defensively, which we'll get into, are just really puzzling. You look at Virginia, they're giving up 30.8 points per game. That includes a blowout over a 43-0 blowout of an FCS team.
Helps.
You take that out, they're giving up 34.6 points per game, and then they shut out Duke, whose offense is just atrocious. I mean, Duke scored 7 points on Wake Forest. They scored 7 points on North Carolina. Those aren't exactly juggernaut defenses.
Right, exactly.
And they're you take those away, they're giving up almost 40 points per game. I mean, this is what Virginia's done, right? They gave up 14 points to Illinois, started off well. Illinois' offense, as we've come to find out, is not very good. They gave a 59 to North Carolina, 37 to Wake Forest, 28 to Miami, and Miami missed several scoring opportunities in that game, including a potential game-winning field goal that bounced off the upright, 33 to Louisville, 40 to Georgia Tech, and 66 to Brigham Young.
Yeah, that was...
They're giving up 30 points a game despite having 2 shutouts. Think about that.
Says it all right there.
If
you know anything about math,
shutouts.
That's really not good.
So they're not good. So back to this matchup. This is one of those games where you're also facing an offense in Virginia that can score, because here's what they've done offensively: 43, 42, 39, 17, 30, 34, 48, 48, and 49. Right? So the reason we mentioned their offense in this matchup is because yes, their defense stinks, but this is not a game you want to go out and score 27 to 34 points, right? Navy's defense wasn't very good. They only scored 34 points. USC's defenses wasn't very good. They only scored 31 points. That may not be enough against this Virginia offense, because you can play good defense against Virginia and give up 27 to 34 points.
Sure.
They've got assuming Brennan Armstrong plays. And the way we're going to prepare for this week is we're going to prepare that Brennan Armstrong's going to play. Because if he doesn't play, this game is going to be a blowout, or should be a blowout. I mean, it shouldn't even be close. Because Brennan Armstrong is Virginia football right now. I mean,
he is. I agree with you.
He is Virginia football right now.
Do you think either way he's going to be 100% though?
But I don't think he has to be 100% to win the game. I mean, you look at what I was just talking with a friend of mine earlier about, we were talking about, the 2018 season and Ian Book and some of those kind of things. And you look back to, when Ian Book got injured and then came back, he wasn't quite the same player, but they still scored 36 points and he still made some throws against Syracuse and, made some big time plays against USC in that game. And, but the way that they run the offense, they can maneuver that offense to take away some of the running he does, maybe some of the shots that they submit him to in games with some of the deeper drops. They can eliminate some of that stuff to protect him.
Yeah.
But the point being is we're going to assume that he is able to play and be healthy, right? Healthy enough to play.
And that's
what
you should assume. Absolutely.
Correct. And that's what Notre Dame should do.
Yes.
So you prepare for Brendan Armstrong, because then if it's one of the other two quarterbacks, it's no problem. So you've got to be prepared to come out and be aggressive, start fast, score early, and really take the fight to Virginia. That has to be your game plan if you're Notre Dame.
No question about it. And that's Notre Dame's offense. I mean, that's what we're talking about. Notre Dame's offense, right, versus this defense. And they just need to do what they do. You don't need to do anything special. You're going to be breaking in some new guys at some new spots a little bit more often than they're normally there, right? And so I don't want to see Notre Dame get cute. I just want to see them run. I want tempo. I always want tempo with this team. No question. I want tempo. And if you watch any kind of Virginia film, teams that go tempo on them, they struggle. They struggle and they get tired very quickly. And
because they're a big defensive line. Like they're a really big physical defensive line.
Right. And they get tired quickly. And if they can't sub those guys out, that spells, doom for this defense.
And their second and third level players look like they get tired easily too, but they're actually just slow.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. There you go.
Like, I'm not saying that to be sarcastic. I mean, it's just they're just slow. Absolutely. They look like they're laboring, but you can see that in the first quarter. I mean, I'm watching the Louisville game today, and they're, it's funny. So let's kind of dive into what Virginia does defensively, because I'm going to point out something which I thought was kind of funny when I was breaking Virginia down. So you talk about kind of what their base defense is. Virginia kind of has they're a little schizophrenic in how they align. And here's an example. So here, Louisville is in basically a two tight end type of offense, right? You've got one tight end here is attached right here, as you can see. The other, there's another guy right here that's a tight end, right? And then you have the quarterback and the running back. Well, in that look, Virginia sort of goes to sort of a traditional look. It's not a 4 down. They're still in their odd front, odd being 3-man front. But then you look at it, they're in 5 techniques at defensive end. They had a nose tackle right over the nose, right? That's an odd front. Then they walk up sort of their outside linebacker hybrid kind of player, and they're in a 4-down look, and they got 2 linebackers and the corners playing up, and looks like a traditional defense, right? And then you say, okay, well that's kind of what they do. And when they line up like this, they're actually pretty decent. And this is what confuses me about what they do. This is when they're at their best, is when they can kind of get their big boys on the field and be a bit physical. Well, the next play, Louisville comes out and lines up like this. Let me get this a little. Louisville comes out like this, and they spread the field, and then this is what Virginia goes to. And this is what we see more often than not. Anytime a team does any kind of 11 personnel, anytime they do anything like that, this is what Virginia goes to. Because you had asked me, are they a 3-2-5, 3-2-6 defense? And I was like, well, a lot of times that's what it looks like. Yeah. And this is my big fear against Notre Dame is if Notre Dame comes out in a lot of 12 personnel, we're going to get this.
Show the forefront,
and that's when Virginia is at their best.
Right.
When you come out with some of this kind of stuff, they're not good. Now, here's the interesting thing. This is when they're at their best against the run. This is not when they're at their best against the pass. Do you remember what happened on this play, Vince?
I do not.
It scored a 92-yard touchdown. They ran a play-action pass and just threw it over the top because they're just not athletic. But against the run, this gives them their best chance. When they go to this look, they can't stop anything. And that's what's so confusing about what they do schematically. It's like you don't stop anybody doing this, right? It's at least when you do this, you have a chance to make teams a little bit one-dimensional, right? You can force teams to throw the ball. So it's really puzzling, some of the things that they do schematically, because they're just not – they don't have the athletes, in my opinion, to do this. And if you're an offensive coach, and you've got ways to get Virginia into this look, you need to take every advantage you can, right? Because they're just not good.
Well, and obviously, with 5 offensive linemen, you can run against this look, right? Because and even Notre Dame's line can run against this look because it's 5-on-3. And if you're down blocking and you're doing some different things and you've got a guy like Kyron Williams or Logan or any of the running backs, I'm not even going to pick one because I saw what did I watch? Earlier today, I was watching the Wake Forest game against Virginia. They had 3 running backs that they played, and they just rotated them. One series, then the next series, then the next series, and all 3 of them had success. And most of the time, they were running into a 5-man box, just like this. And they had a ton of success. They weren't even throwing the ball all that much. And Wake Forest is known for throwing the football, right? I mean, they're balanced, but they're known more for throwing the football than they are running the football. And they ran down Virginia's throat. And it was embarrassing. Like even the announcers were like, they're averaging like 7 yards a carry. I mean, so if Notre Dame can get them into this look, they're still going to run the football. And they're still going to be really good running the football against this. And I will also say that Wake Forest was pretty much, and I texted you this, it just felt like they were kind of flipping through the playbook and like blindly just picking a play.
Mm-hmm.
And they would
just kind of what their offense looks like.
Yeah.
That's what makes it kind of difficult is you just don't know what's coming at you.
Right.
But but to your point, to finish your thought, what you said to me in the text was it all worked.
It all worked. I mean, they were doing whatever they wanted, and it didn't matter. It didn't feel like Wake Forest had a rhyme or a reason to what they were doing, but everything they were doing was working. So, again, Wake Forest is a good team. They're a good ACC team, so take that for what you want on that. But they are light years ahead of where Virginia was on their defensive side of the football.
In that matchup, yes.
In that matchup,
yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes. And that was one of the few times we saw Virginia be vulnerable. They turned the ball over a little bit and some things like that. But so defensively, Vince, that's kind of where they are. They're a 3-down team that's got 3 big physical defensive linemen. But, at this point in time, they just don't have, in my opinion, the athletes to match up with Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm coming from, is why this is a matchup Notre Dame needs to dominate. I mean,
absolutely.
There's no excuse not to just roll this team. I mean, again, let me just go over this one more time so that way we can remind you. This is their last 7 games, 59 points allowed against North Carolina, 37 points allowed against Wake Forest, 28 points allowed against Miami, 33 points allowed against Louisville. Hold on, I went to Duke there real quick. 0 points against Duke, who stinks. 40 points against Georgia Tech, and 66 points against BYU. I mean, they gave up. Listen, in 3 of their last 4 games, they've given up at least 503 yards of offense and at least 7.3 yards per play. Louisville went for 503. Georgia Tech went for 570. BYU went for 734.
Oh my gosh.
Louisville and Georgia Tech both have losing records. They're not good teams. They're not great offenses. Louisville's only averaging 28 points a game this year, and Georgia Tech's only averaging 28. Well, they're both averaging 28.8 and 28.7. These aren't juggernaut offenses.
Right, exactly.
And so it's not like, of course they gave up a lot of points. Those teams are really good offensively. No, they're not. And
No, they're not.
They are. I mean, Louisville ranks 7th in the ACC in total offense, and Georgia Tech ranks 10th in total offense.
Right.
But they shredded Virginia.
Right.
So this is a matchup Notre Dame has to thrive in, and they should. Absolutely. And as we kind of dive into it, Vince, this is a matchup that Notre Dame should perform well. This is a matchup they should play well, and we're going to dive into why that is the case and just exactly how Notre Dame stacks up.
So, Brian, let's jump into the run game for Notre Dame versus the run game defense for Virginia. And I feel like even though those numbers on the left for Notre Dame they're not great. That's not vintage Notre Dame. Let's just get that out of the way. But these numbers are improving from where they were. That I will say. And they're still a lot better than the numbers on the right.
Right.
So, again, this Virginia team is very susceptible to the run, especially when they run that 5-man box. It's just that they get run on, and it doesn't matter really who you are; they can get run on. So this is a very interesting matchup for Notre Dame. For all the people that are high on what the offensive line is doing, this is an opportunity for them to get excited.
Yes.
How's that sound?
Well, it's just kind of funny that we're now in the 9th game of the season, and I'm like, yes, they're not ranked in the hundreds anymore in rushing.
I know, seriously. It's sad, but true.
Last 4 games, Notre Dame is averaging 199 yards rushing per game. We have to, there's the context of that. Now, again, part of that is the fact that they went for 296 on North Carolina. In the other 3 games during that stretch against Virginia Tech, USC, and Navy, they're averaging 166.7 yards per game. Not great, still much better than what they were before. And so to me, that's where you got to get to, right? Is you've got to be able to run the ball. Now, here's the danger that I have for Notre Dame. The danger that I have is that you get into a situation where you try to force the run. See, what teams have done, BYU and these other teams have done, is the running game is a complement to their pass game. Because Virginia Tech's rush, I mean, look at those numbers, Vince. That is so bad.
Yes, it's not.
I mean, they're giving up over 200 yards per game, despite the fact they have some pretty big physical players on their defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
That's really problematic. And so, to me, I don't see how you can't dominate this matchup. I mean, this is by far the worst rush defense you faced. I mean, North Carolina's run defense is better than this. USC's run defense is better than this. Navy's run defense is way better than this. I mean, just the numbers are almost staggering for a Bronco Mendenhall coach team. In the last, again, let's see, 7 games, right? They held Duke to 110. Duke's terrible. They held Miami to 169, 4.2 per carry, right? Those are decent numbers, partly because both of those teams try to be pro-style teams. Miami kept using tight ends and different things like that. Miami wasn't really spreading the field the way they need to, and they tried to run right at Virginia.
Right.
And that's not where you want to be, because the one thing Virginia does well is the traditional just hard downhill runs, right? Like just a hard, quick inside zone, right? Those things they do well because they do have a pretty big like as I said, they have a pretty
big and physical
front 4 or front 3, so to speak. And so that is something that helps them kind of be good. Where they struggle is when teams are a little bit slower. So, like, just to make my point, Mandy Alonso, who's one of their defensive ends, he's 6'2", 285. Jameer Carter, their nose tackle, 6'2", 315. Aaron Famui, I think is how you say that. He's 6'1", 300 pounds. His backup is 6'6", 280. Mandy Alonso's backup is 6'6", 275, and Jameer Carter's backup is 6', 305. It's a big front.
Yeah.
And so if you just kind of try to run right at them, they can have some success. Now, that doesn't mean inside zone doesn't work, but it's just be patient with it, right? Like I could see Logan Diggs having some big inside zone runs. In other instances, I think you really want to try to get off tackle as much as you can, because that's an area, right?
And that's
stretch
an area
plays
where
they're
Notre
trying
Dame's
to create creases,
good. Right. I mean, they've done a good job of getting to the outside, I thought, in the past couple of games.
Yeah, and I'm not concerned about getting to the outside as much. Notre Dame's had success getting outside because they bounce everything, right?
True.
And that's fine, and that'll work against Virginia to a degree. What I'm more referring to is what I like to do against a team that is big, and we've seen a lot of this. So if you, again, back to the last 7 games, I talked about Duke and Miami. They gave up 392 rushing yards to North Carolina, 203 to Wake Forest, 233 to Louisville, 270 to Georgia Tech, and 385 to BYU. Yards per carry, 8.3 against North Carolina, 4.5 against Wake Forest. And you watched that game, Vince. There was a lot late in the game of Wake Forest just kind of running the clock out. 6.9 against Louisville, 7.9 against Georgia Tech, 8.4 against BYU. They're getting gashed. Now, what teams have done, like BYU, for example, had a lot of success running some inside stuff. But what they did was they were running like little T-wraps, which is a tackle wrapping around, G-wraps with the guard wrapping around. Because what Virginia does out of that 3-2 box is when they see you run into a side, they crash that play side linebacker.
Yeah.
And if you're running zone, it's now dependent upon your guard coming off to get him, and it can work. But if you've got to be patient with that zone. But what BYU was doing is they were using their tight end to come crash back on that backside end, and they were sending their backside tackle immediately up to the second level, right? And then what they were doing was they were wrapping their backside guard and tackle one at a time and just hammering that Mike linebacker, kicking him out. Because even though you're meeting him at the same place that your combo guard would meet him, because you're meeting him on sort of a counter type of thing, you're actually working him out, and it creates a vertical crease.
Right.
Because the thing that teams have been able to do against Virginia's defense is to create vertical creases. And that's why, when I talk about outside zone, when I talk about, buck sweeps, when I talk about plays like that, the goal isn't necessarily to get outside. The goal is to stretch them and then create vertical creases.
Right.
Kyron Williams is brilliant at that stuff.
Yes, he is.
And Logan Diggs is brilliant at that stuff. And that's where Chris Tyree can plant and get through a hole and go for 80, right?
Right.
That's the thing. And you require a little bit of patience, because if they're, if you're just running right at them, they're physical, they get off blocks and they can make plays on the ball, but you just got to keep at it, doing those things. But the other thing we've seen teams do is we've seen teams set them up by using formations to spread them out, get them out of their bigger box, use the RPOs, use those type of things. And when you reverse engineer your offense, Virginia doesn't know how to handle that.
Right, exactly.
And
that plays into the hand of what we've seen Notre Dame do well at times. And if they can go back to what they were doing against North Carolina, for example, and up tempo, RPOs, things like that, they're going to have success. And they're going to have a lot of success against this defense. A lot.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as far as advantage goes, I mean, this is an advantage Notre Dame. I mean, even with Notre Dame's season-long struggles, this would still be an advantage Notre Dame. I mean, even if we didn't have the last 2 games, this would still be advantage Notre Dame.
I agree.
This is a really bad. Now, here's the wild card. Here's the 2 concerns I have. Number 1, Notre Dame goes 12, 13 personnel and tries to, they see that Virginia stinks at running the ball.
Right.
And it's, hey, let's go big and let's hammer them. That plays right into Virginia's hands, right into their hands. And not just as a defense, but also an offense. It's not where you want to be. The other one is they are big and physical up front. And Notre Dame hasn't exactly been a big physical offensive line. I mean, they were struggling to move around Navy's undersized guys last week until the 4th quarter.
That's true.
That's my big concern is that they don't come off the ball. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the big concern.
I agree, because if they just do what they were doing a couple of games ago, firing off, trying hard, running their feet, doing those things, they're going to have a lot of success.
Right.
And I guess, I don't know if this is my fear, but I could also see them not doing that and the running backs still having a good game. Because of what we've seen from Kyron Williams and them. But again, that won't lead to the same level of consistent success that you need. Oh, agreed.
Because North Virginia is more physical and stout than North Carolina was, for example.
Right.
And you don't want to put yourself into that situation.
Agreed.
I'm all for, actually, this is a game where I want to allow the running backs to kind of do their own thing. But if you can see, here's the thing. This is what makes Oklahoma's rush offense so good in past years. They're not great this year because they don't have great backs or a great line. But in past years, this is what made North Carolina's run game so good last year. It's a real patient run game that you've got these backs with great vision and great feet, right? Kind of get away from the more traditional runs of just downhill, power, off tackle, hard inside zone, and do things where you let your line kind of get some movement, let those backs find a crease, and then hit it. And when teams have done that against Virginia, it's been real successful. And that's who Notre Dame is right now. I mean, that's when Notre Dame has been successful. It's been those type of things. That works perfectly against them. Now, it works even better when you spread them out, right? That's the thing is I want to run into a 5-man box, not a 7-man box.
Absolutely.
Kyron Williams against a 5-man box is going to go off.
It's going to be nuts.
Logan Diggs, Chris Tyree against 5-man boxes with a guy trying to crash from distance is going to go off. But if Notre Dame tries to come out and go 12, 13 personnel all day, then
they're going to be in a 7 or an 8-man box, and it's not going to end well. I mean, that's just how it goes. I mean, Notre Dame's not good enough in 12 and 13 right now to do that this year.
Well, and it also plays into who Navy, who Virginia wants to be. I mean, that's when Virginia's still their most. They've recruited. It plays
into what they do well.
And here's what hurts them: they're trying to run a defense right now that wasn't what they originally recruited to. They originally recruited to a 3-4 type of defense, right? But because the ACC has gotten so up tempo it kind of happened in a hurry. It's like Mac Brown comes in and he goes to what he's doing. Wake Forest kind of evolved to what they're doing now. You're seeing a lot of these newer coaches in the ACC coming in and bringing like these up tempo offenses, right? And Virginia, who had recruited to be a 3-4 team, now has 3-4 personnel, but they don't necessarily they don't have so they're going to have to recruit to a different type of defense.
Sure.
And that's so you don't want to allow them to then line up into the type of things where they're actually built for. And that's why it doesn't mean you don't go 12 personnel ever. It doesn't mean you can't use 13 personnel in certain circumstances. It just means you've got to have the same game plan Brian Kelly talked about against USC and North Carolina, which is your pass is setting up your run, your formations, and it doesn't always just mean throwing the football. It just means use your more spread sets, right? Get them out. If you're going to go 12 personnel, spread them out, mix it up, do some different things and see how they handle those type of things. Put your tight ends on the outside, right? And then, have your two receivers in the slot so you can run your screens and your quick game and then see how they handle it. If they want to stay big and defend the run because it's 12 personnel, then pull that sucker out and throw a bubble screen to Kevin Austin or Lorenzo Styles or something like that, right? Throw a quick outside look screen to the field to Michael Mayer, something like that. You know what I mean? And if they want to spread out, then that's when you can still hammer. I mean, so there again, it's like we talked about yesterday, Vince. There still has to be some creativity,
right?
What they do, and we just haven't seen that out of 12 personnel, and that's really one of my bigger concerns out of 12. Now, if you want to come out of 12 personnel first play the game and throw a play action pass to George Takis, okay, we can look at some of those things, right? Because what you're trying to do out of that is what's important is if you really think that 12 personnel needs to be a big part of what you do moving forward, because you are so thin at receiver, then what you have to do is you have to spend this game really doing a lot of tendency breakers, right? What that means is Notre Dame has a very heavy tendency of teams can watch film and they can insert data into your computer about what Notre Dame does out of 12 personnel and have a really good idea that, number one, they're not going to throw to their number 2 tight end. They're a very heavy run team. They do these type of plays out of it, right? They're going to be a play action run team out of 12 personnel. Okay, that's what the data tells you.
Right, absolutely.
So that after that, it's okay. So what can we do coming into this game to say, hey, look, we've got to make sure that we're doing some things out of 12 personnel they're not used to, that they haven't seen.
Absolutely.
Do some more motions and shifts and those kind of things. So if you want to go that route where 12 personnel is where you want to go, then you need to make sure that you're just not lining up and just saying, hey, we're going to go, ace personnel or wings or, over person, just things that they've done in the past, which are kind of okay. And you're not going to throw to George Takis. I mean, if 12 personnel has to be a big part of what you do, then George Takis needs 3 targets in the first half.
Right.
Absolutely. And not like on little slides, like throw them on a drag, throw them on a seam, you know what I mean? And now all of a sudden Virginia's on its heels and now you can do what you need to do. So Notre Dame may decide that 12 personnel is where they need to go. And so I don't agree with it, but if they do, then that's the things we need to see them do to be successful in this matchup out of that. What are your thoughts on that, Vince?
No, I completely agree with you. I think they went into 12 personnel, or it might even have been 13 personnel against Navy, and they only put 3 guys out on a route. It was it must have been 12 personnel because it was the 2 receivers and Michael Mayer. And it was like, what are you doing? And it didn't work for me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't creative at all. It was just kind of a flood concept and a rollout. And we've been saying that I don't mind getting Jack Cohn out in space and rolling out. That's fine. No problem with that. But when Navy's dropping 8 and you put 3 in, you put 3 in out there to catch passes, it doesn't generally work out too well. So they need to reflect on what they've been doing out of 12 and 13 personnel, if that's what they want to do, and just break the trend, right? They have to do some self-scouting. We talk about that all the time during the bye week, doing self-scout. You have a handful of analysts. That's what they do.
Right.
Have them self-scout you, and so that you know what you've been doing so that you don't.
Right. That's exactly what GAs and analysts are for.
Yes.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that's what you hire them to do. Yes. And that's the other thing too, is if you are in a position because of your injuries that you have to adjust what you've been, then you need to fully adjust.
Yes.
So, okay, if we're going to be a 12 personnel team, we need to do that. The reason I'm not optimistic that's going to happen is because they ran a lot of 12 personnel last year and didn't do that.
Right.
You know, they were very predictable. The
Their
reason
12
they were
personnel
successful.
package is very
Let's be honest, Notre Dame was good last year running the ball because their guys were way better than everybody else they faced.
Yes.
Way
absolutely
better.
Correct.
And this team isn't that. This isn't that line, right?
Right.
You don't have Tommy
be.
Tremble blocking a tight end anymore. You don't have Brock Wright blocking a tight end anymore. You have to say, okay, so then we got to scheme a little bit more. Last year we could just rely on our dudes, right? And we could scheme around having better players. This year it's like, okay, you don't have that up front. Okay, so how do you handle that? So that's going to be the interesting thing, and the thing I'm looking forward to seeing what they do defensively in this game, because this is a matchup. I mean, you talk about advantage. You know, we give advantages. This is clearly advantage Notre Dame.
It's look, I've hesitated to give Notre Dame the advantage when it comes to run game offensively in the past. This is not one of those days at all. Like there's no hesitation in any way to give Notre Dame the advantage in the run game offensively. Zero. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I just look. I want to point this up because this is just absurd. In Virginia's last 2 games, they're giving up. Let's see here. 327.5 yards per game and over 8 yards a carry against Georgia Tech and BYU.
Yeah.
Now, and you say, well, yeah, BYU's a good running team. BYU, with that game included, is only averaging 187.5 yards per game and 5.2 yards per carry.
And where does that place them in the general scheme of things? It's got to be about midway.
But BYU, that's a very sort of top 50-ish rushing offense. 187.5 is 44.
Okay.
And that
better than I thought it was, actually.
That includes having just rushed for a season high 385.
That is.
They followed that up, for context. They followed that up with 173 and 4.6 yards per carry in their next game against Idaho State.
Idaho State.
They ran for 111 against Boise State. They ran for 67 at 2.8 per carry against Baylor.
Okay.
You get my point?
Yeah,
right?
No, I absolutely get your point. Yeah. That number's helped out tremendously by one afternoon in Charlottesville.
Yes. They've had 4 games this year. BYU's played 9 games, right?
Yeah.
They are 6, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, they're actually, have they played 10 games? Hold on a second.
It's possible.
Yeah, they've played 10 games.
Yeah.
They've played 10 games this year so far, and they've averaged over 5 yards a carry in 4 of them. That's it.
Yeah.
And they've only averaged over 5.5 yards per carry in 3 of them. And that was against South Florida, Utah State, and then, of course, a big jump, Virginia. Their highest game before that was 6.1 against Utah State, 5.7 against South Florida, 5.02 against Utah. So it's not like BYU just comes out and does that every week.
Right, exactly.
It was an abnormal performance against a really bad defense.
Before we jump into the next one, we got a couple super chats I want to get out of the way before we lose them, because I don't want to lose them. TJ says thank you, and Irish boards. So that's a good one. And then we have one here from Joseph McIntyre. Love the IB analysis. Go Irish, from MacND90 in La Cruces, New Mexico.
Nice.
Hope I pronounced that right. But so had to get those 2 going. Thank you very much for those super chats. Much.
I didn't see those. They didn't show up on my thing, Vince.
Well, that's not good. Well, I'm glad we got them.
I'm glad you're paying attention to that.
Absolutely. All right. There we go. All right. So the Notre Dame pass game against the Virginia pass defense. And as I had mentioned prior, I will say that at times Virginia is okay in the pass game. At times. But it just always seems like if there's a 50-50 ball, or if there's a chance for the offense to make a play, it seems like they do. In the games that I have watched.
They don't defend the perimeter one-on-ones well at all. They have no concept of how to defend a back shoulder.
Right.
And BYU just kept running it over and over and over.
And I will also say that when they're in zone, there's a guy that tends to get loose an awful lot. Now, whether the quarterback finds that particular receiver or not is another conversation, but it seems like somebody gets loose an awful lot in zone. There seems to be a lot of confusion to me as I watch these games. Two guys go into the same area, just letting a guy go within their own zone when they shouldn't because they're thinking somebody else is coming in, whatever. It just seems like there's guys running open just an awful lot.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it boils down to, Vince, they don't really have an identity defensively.
Yeah,
they
agreed.
have personnel that doesn't fit what they're trying to do defensively, and I think that's something that has hurt them this season.
Right.
I think that when you recruit to a certain look, right, and you're trying to be a certain team, and then you recruit to that, and then you have to now start doing things that are different from that, you're going to have some problems. And I think that's what's hurt Virginia is they recruited to a big 3-4 personnel, and they don't have that personnel. And it's really kind of weird because 2 years ago, Virginia had one of the best secondaries Notre Dame faced. And if you remember that 2009 secondary that had Bryce Hall.
Oh, that's right.
In 2019, that secondary was really good. And now you look at it and you're like, wow, what happened to them? Because it's not the same team. And it's because I think they're not the same defense. They're doing different things now. And that's the same coaches. And that's, I think, part of the problem is they're trying to teach something that I don't think they necessarily understand. It'd be kind of like this. Imagine if Tommy Rees is the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame. Imagine Brian Kelly retires and they hire Jeff Monken, the Army coach. And he says, "Okay, Tommy, I want you to run my option offense." Well, Tommy can learn it to a degree, but he's not going to really be able to run it effectively because he doesn't know the ins and outs of it.
Right.
And part of it is, well, when we're struggling, what are the buttons we need to push to get ourselves on track?
Sure.
That's sort of a really rough analogy of what it's like. I think these coaches are trying to change to something that's not part of who they are. And it's not just tweaking who you are. It's a complete dramatic shift of what they're trying to do. And it doesn't really work. And because of the way they've recruited, they have personnel playing at positions that they're not really comfortable in. And I think that's something that's really hurt their pass game because, you mentioned at times their pass defense is pretty good. Very few times.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I saw some sticky corner action, some things like that. But again, it's few and far between. I will admit that.
And I'll tell you something. So they played Notre Dame in 2019, and Notre Dame only passed for 165 yards in that game. If you remember, Notre Dame had 2 defensive touchdowns and then another fumble return that was like inside the 5. I mean, it was the pass rush just ate Virginia up that game. Coming into that game, as I said, Virginia had a really good pass defense. The year before, in 2018, Virginia only gave up 183 passing yards a game. They gave up 12 touchdowns and had 17 interceptions. They came into 2019, and until they started off well, gave up 185, 130, 234 to Florida State in a win, 206, 165, 182, 118, 133. Okay, but in one of those later games against Miami, Bryce Hall got hurt. If you remember that, he just blew his knee up. And he just wasn't that, I think he came back in 2020, but he wasn't that guy anymore. I can't remember if he came back in 2020 or not, but that crushed them. And that's kind of when you started to see the evolution. And if you look at the rest of that year, they gave up 350. Remember, 234 was the most they'd given up, right?
Right.
They had 6 in 8 games. They'd only given up more than 200 passing yards twice. Since then, this is what Virginia has done. This is 353, 229, 313, 311, 408, 305. 2020, 286, 329, 184, 309, 322, 443, 161, 278, 520, 212. And then this year, 89 against William & Mary. And since then, 221, 307, 270, 203, 270, 215, 300, 349. They went from being one of the best pass defenses in the country 2 seasons ago to now their pass defense can't stop anybody. And it's been one of the most strange, immediate transformations I've ever seen.
Right.
And part of it again is I don't think this staff fully understands the ins and outs of what they're trying to run because they've changed from who they used to be. They used to be a very traditional defense that relied on their corners to play off man, and they were really smart and they were really sound. And at the time, the ACC didn't have a bunch of really high outscoring offenses. Remember, 2 years ago, Pitt's offense was garbage. You know what I mean? Like 2 years ago, Pitt was like a nothing but a defensive team. And maybe it was 3 years ago. And it's just like now you look at Pitt, and Pitt's scoring on everybody now. I mean, the league has changed in a hurry. Yeah, 2 years ago, 2019, Pitt averaged 21.2 points per game. Now they're averaging 45. And so the league changed in a hurry. And I don't think Virginia was prepared for how it changed.
Right.
And that's really the thing is like I and it's not that like okay, so like 2019 you had Clemson at 43.9, and then after that it was Louisville at 33, North Carolina at 33, then Wake Forest. There's like 5 other teams that scored over 30, right? And right now there's still only 6 teams that score over 30, but now it's Pitt's at 45, Wake Forest is at 44.7, North Carolina's at 38.9. Miami's at 32. I mean, so now a lot more teams in this league can score and score a lot. And if you notice that when I mentioned all those teams, no Clemson. Clemson's 13th in the ACC right now in scoring. So it's not like, oh, it's Clemson again. And so the league has changed quickly and they haven't been able to keep up. I mean, 2 years ago, Wake Forest was at 31.8, North Carolina was at 33. Now Wake Forest is at 45 points a game. Hits at 45 points a game.
Now, would you have completely overhauled the way they do things defensively, or would you have stuck with what they – would you have overhauled completely what they did defensively, like kind of how they did, or would you have stuck with what they do and just do that better?
I think they should have tried to alter it within who they are and then started recruiting to what they wanted to be.
Okay, as opposed to trying to change.
Because you can't put players in a situation where you're asking them to do things they can't do.
Right.
And that ultimately is the problem. You talk about you watch the games, Vincent. How many times are you seeing their corners get beat on back shoulders? Because they've got bigger corners, and those guys just aren't real athletic.
Right.
Those are guys that should be playing off coverage and keeping things in front of them.
Sure.
Right. That's what they're better geared more to do.
Sure.
Anthony Johnson's a big old physical corner. The way that they play, so their field, they're going to play off a lot. Right, their safeties are off, their corners are off, and then Anthony Johnson's their boundary corner. He's like 6'1", about 200 pounds, big physical kid. He presses a lot. He's pretty good at it. He gets a little grabby. He'll get called for PIs, but he's a pretty decent player. But a lot of the success they have is to the field, and then attacking their safeties. And the way that they play this defense now, they leave their safeties exposed a lot in coverage, and that hasn't worked real well for them.
Right.
And so to me, that's something that they've got to try to figure out ways to not get their safeties as exposed anymore. But the thing that they've done all year is they give up a lot of big plays down the field. And I'm looking at I'm watching them like, boy, this they shouldn't be leaving that guy in that situation. Boy, they shouldn't be leaving that guy in that situation.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's what it boils down to me is you're asking guys to do things they can't do.
Right.
And that's just not a recipe for success, in my opinion. And if they were going to do that, then they should have done something in a way that says, okay, let's alter what we're going to do. And yeah, we're going to give up big plays, but at least we're going to try to find ways to be, turnover prone. But they're not really that either. I mean, you can see they only have 5 interceptions on the year. So so let's get specific on what Notre Dame in this matchup. Number one, your RPOs have to be a big part of what you do. Early down success is huge against Virginia. They're going to give you stuff. Take it. Don't be afraid to take it.
No question.
Take the hitches, take the slides, take the outs.
Right.
Take the field flood concepts. I think are real effective. Whether it's with sprint outs, whether it's drop back, the field flood concepts can be very effective. Take advantage of Anthony Johnson's aggressiveness by getting him to chase. I think you can do some things where, like one thing I would love to see is sort of, if you've got your tight, in like a 2x2 set, you've got your tight end to that side, have your tight end on the ball, either lined up attached or in a flex, and have Kevin Austin off the ball and then motion him and, make Anthony Johnson flip his hips, right? That it's not really what he wants to do. He wants to just press and jam you. And once he kind of gets that lock on you, he's in good. what you want to get him doing is chasing. So stack him and, send Kevin Austin on crossing routes and drag routes.
Yes.
Or do things where you run your tight end right through Anthony Johnson, right? And then bring Kevin Austin inside against your safeties. Okay. And then if they want to switch that, right? If they want to switch that, okay, then you've got some things you can do. If they want to try to play over that and have Anthony Johnson still go over top and then that guy run, then I'm running delay follows with my running back, right? So send them up and then just delay and slide Kyron Williams right out of there, or bring those guys vertical and then bring your slots and your X on crossers to replace. Anything you can do to get their linebackers and safeties in isolations is a plus for this game because they cannot cover. They're not good cover players. And so, and when I mean cover, I mean vertically.
Right.
Those are things Notre Dame and vertically and then on chasers down the field where Virginia's linebackers are pretty good. Like Nick Johnson, for example. If you're just throwing quick swings and quick slides to the field, he's going to play it and get downhill in a hurry and jump all over it, right? Get him vertical first and then let Kyron Williams beat him on some routes where he's got to flip his hips. Those are different things that I think you can do, but take the RPOs, right? Don't just – and the big thing is you have to have the middle of the field accounted for constantly because Virginia, first of all, they're not good in the middle of the field. Number one.
No, they're not.
Number two, when I watch them play, I see a team that will try to do things. They know they stink on defense, right? That's the one thing. They're very aware that they're not good. So they will try to dial up some things. We will see a corner fire, at least one or two corner fires this game. That's just who they are. And the fact Notre Dame still hasn't figured out how to pick it up.
It's who they are, and they've seen it effective on the film against Notre Dame. So those two things combined.
Yes. The only teams that haven't beat Notre Dame for corner fires are teams that don't run corner fires. So
I would put one in.
Huh?
I said I would put one in.
Yes. Well, I would have $1.
Just saying.
Middle of the field's going to be there too. They will. I mean, there's times where, and I'm trying to remember who it was, but I can't remember who it was. But they ran just like a little tight end pop right behind because Virginia they'll just bring their inside linebackers, and then there's this huge gap in between the linebacker level and the safeties.
That was it was well, they did it in the Wake Forest game for sure. Okay. He was actually it was a tight end, but he was detached. He was in the slot.
He was like flexed out, right?
But he replaced the linebacker,
right?
And it was an instant. I mean, it was wide open.
Yeah, right? I mean, whether it's Mayer or Kevin Austin or somebody
totally vacated.
The middle of the field has to be a part of your game plan.
Yes,
and because that's where their worst cover players are.
Right.
So that doesn't mean you don't hit the outs, and I think out cuts, flood concepts of the outside. This is a game where four verts will be effective, right? So you ran it a bunch last week.
Yeah, they did.
This is a week but attack the seams because the thing that four verts does for you is it allows you to hit those back shoulders. It allows you to attack the seams. It allows you to find their vulnerabilities because the way that they drop 8 is not like the way that Navy drops 8, where Navy was dropping 8 sort of aggressively. The way that Virginia does it is like there's like nobody on the screen except for the 3 linebackers after like a second. You know what I mean? It's like there's just these big soft spots. Just take those shots, take those 5 to 6 yard gains. Now they may watch how Navy gave Notre Dame problems, and I feel like the drop 8 thing is frustrating because we've been talking about this in Stanford in 2010.
Yeah,
this has been something teams have had success with against Brian Kelly's offenses for years. They didn't do it as much when Chip Long was here because Chip had ways of exploiting it, and it didn't really work a whole lot in 2015 because you could just Deshaun Kaiser was such a great deep ball thrower, and Malik Zaire was such a great deep ball thrower, and you had a Will Fuller, Chris Brown, and Amir Carly. You just kind of okay, fine. You want to drop 8 and not give. I mean, and they had the best offensive line in college football. Deshaun could just take his time and just launch it and outrun your defense,
because my guy runs a lot faster forward than your guys do dropping backwards. So
and you had to account for CJ Procise out of the backfield and all those type of things. So they're going to have to figure that out because look, teams are copycats. They're going to be like, man, if Navy could give Notre Dame problems with that,
absolutely.
Hey, with our guys, we could give them problems with that. So they're going to have a plan. And so, I think the way that Virginia plays, I think four verts is more effective than it was last week. Again, because as you mentioned, Vince, the back shoulders are there all day.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've got to be willing to throw them though. That's the question.
Yeah.
But you also have to do some vertical stuff. And now again, four verts is a horizontal stretch. right? It is not a vertical stretch. 4 verts explains the routes that are being run. 4 verticals, right? A vertical stretch is, again, similar thing. It's high-low, but it's actually it's with guys going like this, right? Because you're stretching the defense vertically.
Right.
It's about the read. You're reading
You can
vertically,
explain
you're
that
stretching
1,000 different
vertically.
times just to get people.
But we have new people in the channel, so I want to make sure that they understand. Horizontal stretch is when you're kind of stretching them left to right with the read. 4 verts means your read is kind of going horizontally. Okay, so that's why it sounds like, wait a minute, 4 verts is a horizontal stretch? I don't understand. So that's basically what that means. But wasn't as effective last week consistently. They did hit a couple big plays with it. This is a game where I think you could run it. You can run a heavy dose of it. Now, the thing is, Virginia saw you run it 87,000 times last week.
Exactly.
They're going to have a plan for it. So you need to have something to go with it. So one thing I would consider doing is, as I said earlier, is, you run your verts to the field, okay? And then, do the thing where you've got Mayer attached or George Takis attached, bring Kevin Austin on a stack, send Takis on a wide fade to try to run through Anthony Johnson, and then just have Kevin Austin run at 5 to 6 yard depth across the field. Make them chase you. Because what's going to happen is, if the linebackers close hard on Austin, that field seam is there. Bam, you just throw it right behind the linebackers because their safeties take off, Vince. I mean, you've seen it. Their safeties bail. And then if the linebackers are running underneath that seam to Michael Mayer, and that's why I would kind of have Takis at the boundary, because if they're going to run with Michael Mayer on the seam, you bring Kevin Austin on the crossing route, it's game over. I mean, those are things that I want to see. So it requires just a little creativity. It requires a little bit of self-analysis, right? Some self-reflection. Here's what we ran a lot of. They're going to be prepared for that. How can we counter what they're going to do to stop it? That's what good offensive coordinators do.
Sure.
And that's what I want to see from Coach Reese this week. Because if we see that, this is certainly a matchup Notre Dame can take advantage of. I mean, Notre Dame's numbers are okay in the pass game.
Yeah.
They're okay.
But
they're way better than Virginia's numbers.
Right, exactly. So it's clearly an advantage for Notre Dame. I mean, just clearly.
Right. So, and it's also a personnel advantage. As I mentioned, Virginia just does not have a lot of speed on defense.
Right.
They don't have a lot of speed on defense. Now, I do like Anthony Johnson. I think he's a good corner. Like, he is a good boundary physical corner. He'll get beat from time to time, and he doesn't play the back shoulders well, but he's physical. He forces a lot of incompletion. So I'm not saying avoid him. But what I'm saying is the game plan with Kevin Austin needs to be ways where you're getting Anthony Johnson out of his comfort zone. His comfort zone is you just line up in the boundary, and I'm going to get in your face, and I'm going to play you, right? That's what he wants to do. What's frustrated me with Notre Dame this year is they haven't done things to counter teams that like to do that. So like we talked about, stacking, right? Getting that guy on the move, things along those lines. Putting a different type of athlete there. Put Michael Mayer backside and have your 3 receivers. And if Anthony Johnson wants to stay backside, he can fight with Michael Mayer all he wants. I'm going to run my 3 receivers to the field. Those are all things that I think you can do effectively against Virginia. But at the end of the day, the big thing is, Vince, you've got to protect the quarterback. Virginia's not a great pass rushing team, as you see there. They rank 120th in the country. According to Pro Football Focus, they only have 2 defenders on their entire defense that have more than 10 or more quarterback hurries on the season. The number 1 guy has got 13. Their number 2 guy has 10. If you want to kind of have a little bit of context on putting that into perspective, okay? So their number 1 guy has 13. Their number 2 guy has 10. Myron Tungavaloa by himself has more than that. Actually, let me do that real quick, because that's hurries. So total pressures, okay? Those are hurries. Total pressures, 17, 15, 13, 11, 11, 10. That's their 6 best pass rushers in total pressures, okay? Only 2 guys have more than 10 hurries. So total pressures, they have 6 guys that have 10 or more, nobody with more than 17. If you look at Notre Dame has – their top guy has 31. Their number 2 guy has 30. Their number 3 guy has 22, and that's Isaiah Foskey. And I think that's an undersold number.
That's a lower number than I anticipated.
12 of his 22 have been hits on the quarterback, either sacks or hits, right? So that puts it into context.
Right.
But yeah, it's 169. Notre Dame has 169 total pressures this year. Virginia has 114 total pressures this year. That's a lot. And again, Notre Dame's is a little bit lower because they just got done playing a triple option team who threw the ball, who called 5 drop back plays the whole game. And Notre Dame had, I think, pressures on 3 of those 5, right? Sacks on 2 of them.
Right.
So, but look, we've seen teams that aren't good at rushing the quarterback give Notre Dame problems this year. And the reason this matchup concerns me a little bit more than the number should, Vince, is because they are power rushers.
Yeah, exactly.
They are big physical. And I have nightmares of Josh Lugg and Joe Alt just coming off and these 300-pound kids just driving them into the quarterback.
Yeah.
That's a big concern. If they can give Jack Cohn a pocket and time to throw this week, he will go off.
Yes, he will have a Florida State-ish type, day, in my opinion. Yes, absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm running a little low on time, so we got to get to the
advantage
next.
Notre Dame, certainly for this one.
No question.
All right. And then this one, these are always the shorter ones. This isn't even close.
No. No. I mean, there's so many triple-digit numbers over there for Virginia when we're talking about total defense. And look, are Notre Dame's numbers where I would like them to be, where I think they could be? No, they're not. But they're light years better than what Virginia has. I mean, light years better. I mean, this isn't even close for me. I mean, look, I guess if we're going to dive into the numbers specifically, the only thing that Virginia does well, and I did notice that a little bit in the games that I was watching, sometimes teams get bogged down in the red zone against this team.
Because here's why. Everything we just talked about, right? They're big, they're physical.
Correct.
They're big and physical at corner, they're big and physical at safety, they're big and physical at linebacker. When you can't run, like in the red zone, you can't there's not as much room to force them to chase. Your speed is negated. And that's exactly right. It's a great observation, Vince. And the numbers back that up. Their red zone defense is good and their red zone touchdown defense is good because of the fact that they're big and physical.
Right.
You've got to have some creativity there. And of course, Notre Dame's red zone offense and defense hasn't been good. And this is the matchup that right there. Look, if Notre Dame's scoring offense is better than their scoring defense, Notre Dame's total offense is way better than their total defense. Notre Dame doesn't turn it over a ton. They don't force turnovers.
Right.
The third downs are similar. Notre Dame should have a lot of success there, but the red zone one is the big key for me because if Notre Dame has 4 scoring drives in the first half or 5 scoring drives in the first half, but 3 of them end in field goals or 4 of them end in field goals,
or might
Virginia
be losing.
May have a lead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Might be losing.
You've got to have touchdowns.
Playing. Yeah,
and that's the other thing is you've got to score touchdowns because that's going to help your defense. If Notre Dame can put some points on the board early and create some distance and then force Virginia to be a passing team, a heavy passing team, then Notre Dame can pin their ears back and attack Brennan Armstrong. That's where Notre Dame really pulls this thing away. And that's going to be the key because if you look at Virginia's losses, a lot of their losses that they lose by a bunch of points, they got pulled away from late because they were playing catch up the whole game.
Right.
North Carolina was that way. Wake Forest was that way. BYU was that way. Where it was kind of a back and forth affair early, but Virginia just kept trying to keep up with BYU. And eventually BYU was able to pull ahead. And a couple turnovers by Brennan Armstrong allowed BYU to really take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So, and that's the other thing is they will turn it over on offense. Virginia will. They will. And that's an area where you say, okay, well, they're as good as Brennan Armstrong has been this year, Vince, he's thrown 8 picks in 9 games.
And this is why, for me, and I'm not saying it's the make or break in this game, but if Kyle Hamilton can play in this game, it's a ball game because I think he gets a pick or 2 in this game. I do, or he just his presence alone forces picks other places, right? Because Armstrong's going to be afraid to go anywhere near 14, and he should be. But I just think that his presence alone is going to be huge.
Because Virginia's turned it over 13 times in 9 games.
Yeah.
Right. And when that happens, this is a big part of the matchup that's not reflected in these numbers. Your sudden change offense has to be great.
Right.
When you get the ball on a short field, you got to get 6.
Right.
That's got to be a big part of this. And I think the Notre Dame defense will force a turnover at some point in time, and especially in the first half, or get a big stop where you pin them deep and you punt and you get the ball near midfield. Those are both sudden change situations. In those instances, the Notre Dame offense they need to convert with touchdowns.
Absolutely.
If they can do that, then I think this is a game that they can win relatively comfortably.
Agreed.
If they can't do that, then Virginia can not only make this a game, but Virginia can pull an upset, because we're making it sound like Virginia sucks because we're only focusing on one side of the ball in this matchup.
The defense does.
Their defense is awful, awful. But the reason they're 6-3 is because they can score on everybody.
Right.
And that's the danger. So the offense has to be the defense's best. The Notre Dame offense has to be the Notre Dame defense's best friend this week. You got to come out, score early, score fast. You can't have the missed opportunities like you had against Navy. You can't have the missed opportunities like you had against North Carolina. You have to come out and you have to put pedal to the metal, get the crowd out of the game, put the ball in the end zone, get Virginia on their heels, create doubt in Virginia's minds about, hey, y'all, sorry, you're having a great year, but you have no chance today. And that's what Notre Dame has to do. But so this is another advantage Notre Dame. So that's going to do it for our stacking up breakdown. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. And if you haven't signed up, sign up for the Irish Breakdown message board. I'm going to put a link to our message board at the bottom. And if you want to sign up, we've had a lot of people sign up this week, which I greatly appreciate. I'm seeing more and more people from the YouTube channel starting to sign up for the message board, which we greatly appreciate. So really diving into the full Irish Breakdown community aspect, which we greatly appreciate. And we just continues to help us grow and grow and grow and grow. So that's it. Tomorrow's one is going to be a lot more fun to talk about, Vince. The matchup of the Notre Dame defense and the Virginia offense is going to be a lot of fun. Like, I'm watching Virginia's defense today, and I'm just like disgusted. Like, I texted you, I feel like I get dumber watching this defense play. It's just so bad. Tomorrow's going to be a different story. Their offensive staff right now is putting some really fun stuff on the field. I cannot wait to dive even further into their offensive film tonight and talk about what's made them so dynamic on offense this year, because they are dynamic when Brennan Armstrong is back there. So I'm looking forward to that. That will be our topic of conversation tonight. And there might, I'm not guaranteeing, but there might be a podcast tonight where we talk about another Notre Dame sport and something that may happen tonight. So pay attention to Twitter and hit the notification bell, because if that happens, we might, again, I'm still trying to line some things up, not guaranteeing it. We might do something tonight about that. So anyway, for Vince up there, I'm Brian. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you again very, very soon.